Hey guys, tonight we're going to travel back in time, but not to marvel at knights, castles, or royal feasts. Instead, we're stepping into the skin of someone like you, someone with a mind that runs a little faster, heart that beats a little harder, and a sense of dread that comes out of nowhere. In other words, someone with anxiety. But the catch is, you're not in 2025. You're waking up in medieval Europe. So, before we dive into this anxious adventure, take a moment to like this video and subscribe only if you enjoy falling asleep to historically accurate psychological horror stories. And let me know where you're watching from and what time it is. Now dim the lights. Maybe curl under your blanket and prepare yourself, because this is why you wouldn't survive a day with anxiety in medieval times. The sun rises. Though you didn't sleep much, your straw mattress is itchy, your back hurts, and your mind never shut off through the night. Did you leave the barn door open? Did you forget to pay your tithe? What if the baker thinks you looked at him funny and reports you to the priest? These thoughts swirl endlessly. You stare at the wooden ceiling beams above and feel that familiar pressure in your chest. But in the 1300s, this feeling has no name. It's not anxiety, it's something wrong. You slowly rise, careful not to disturb your sibling on the floor next to you. Yes, you share a room with the whole family, because privacy isn't a thing. You tiptoe past the cold hearth and outside into the muddy street. You're already breathing a little too fast, and your hands are shaky. But you've got to feed the chickens, fetch water, and try not to appear strange. Because strange is dangerous, strange is suspicious, and suspicion can get you punished, shunned, or even accused of witchcraft. Your neighbor walks by and gives you a look. You can't tell if it's curiosity or contempt. Your stomach drops. Your body tells you it's a threat. Your heart races. But you can't say, "I'm having a panic attack." There's no such phrase. There's only one phrase that matters today. Are you possessed? You try to shake it off. You busy yourself with chores, mucking the stables, grinding grain, pretending that everything's fine. Your thoughts keep looping. Am I lazy? Am I weak? What if the priest notices me trembling during Mass? In our modern world, you could Google symptoms, call a friend, or even do some breathing exercises on an app. But in 1347, there's no one to tell you that what you're feeling is normal, valid, or even real. Because here's the thing. Emotions are judged based on the four humors. That's right, your entire mental health is supposedly controlled by your internal goo. If you're anxious, it's because your black bile is too high. Or maybe your phlegm is out of whack. Maybe you're just naturally melancholic, which means your horoscope, yes. Astrology was medical science back then, is all wrong. Someone might suggest that you need to be bled literally cut open to balance your fluids. Or maybe you need more garlic, or a dead frog tied around your neck. Who can say? You're feeling lightheaded. Your vision narrows a bit as the anxiety snowballs, but you don't dare sit down. You're not allowed to look idle. That, too, can be interpreted as sloth a sin. In fact, a surprising number of medieval sermons equated emotional distress with moral failure. If you're overwhelmed, you must not be praying enough. Or worse, you're tempting the devil, so you go to church, not for comfort, but to avoid questions. The local friar is already at the altar, booming in Latin about sin, wrath, and eternal damnation. There's incense in the air and a cold, damp wind in the stone chapel. It's the kind of place that should be calming, but you can't breathe. The walls feel like they're closing in. You try to focus on the stained glass windows. You try to breathe quietly, but it doesn't work. You start shaking. A woman sees you. She whispers to her friend. Someone coughs. You imagine they're all watching you, judging. What if they think you're possessed? What if they call the priest over to exorcise you? Now, here's where things could go from medieval awkward to medieval terrifying. If your behavior seems odd enough, you might be dragged to the local healer or cunning woman. She might give you herbs or tell you to confess your sins. If you're a woman, she might suggest you're menstruating too much, or not enough, or that you've been bewitched, or you guessed it, you are the witch. Let's not even get into the fact that crying was often seen as a sign of being unbalanced. If you cried in public, you might be locked up. If you tried to run away, they'd tie you down. If you didn't show emotion, you're cold and heartless. Either way, you lose. There's no language for emotional nuance. No one asks, "How are you?" Really, no one checks in. And the word depression won't show up in any useful sense for another 500 years. The best you can hope for is someone calling you sensitive. The worst is that they call the town constable and report you as mad. So you do what millions of people did in that era. You hide it. You keep working. You bite the inside of your cheek to stay grounded. You tell yourself it's your fault. You pray harder. You stare at the chickens and wonder why they look so calm. You cry silently into your sleeves after dark. hoping no one hears you. It's only noon. You've survived a morning in medieval Europe with an anxious brain. Congratulations. But the truth is, you're exhausted. You're alone in your own mind. And you've got another 8 hours of fieldwork, feigned normalcy, and soul-suffocating silence ahead of you. And yes, you still have to eat a turnip stew and avoid the plague. It's mid-afternoon now, and your body is running on fumes. Not that anyone would notice, because in this world, physical pain is expected, emotional pain is invisible, and any complaint is a sign of weakness or sin. You take a break behind the cottage, just long enough to wipe your face and whisper into your hands, "Why am I like this?" But of course, no one answers. In the 14th century, the only people who might even begin to guess at your condition are the ones most likely to misinterpret it. Your mother sees you sitting alone. Her brow furrows. She tells you to stop dawdling. You're not bleeding. You're not dying. You're not even coughing up bile. So what's the problem? You've always been sensitive, she mutters. Like it's a curse passed down from a weak-willed aunt. She says your cousin works twice as hard without complaint. When I was your age, I was already married with 3 kids, she adds. You feel the words like arrows. You want to scream? But screaming would only confirm everyone's suspicions that you're not quite right. Back to work. Then, you gather water from the well, which is a 15-minute walk in each direction. That's 30 minutes round trip to ruminate over every perceived social misstep you've made since breakfast. You remember spilling the goat's milk? You remember the stable boy laughing when you jumped at a noise. You wonder if the priest noticed how you didn't make eye contact this morning? You're spiraling, but you're also sweating from the effort, which hides your shaking, so at least there's that. In the modern world, someone might suggest grounding techniques. You'd count objects, notice colors, focus on breath. Here, there's no coping strategy except keep going, or else. The or else ranges from public embarrassment to being labeled unholy. And once that label sticks, good luck shaking it off. Medieval society thrives on clear roles and rigid order. If you're not the brave peasant, the obedient daughter, the quiet monk, or the devoted wife, then what are you? Sometimes, you're just trouble. And trouble in a tightly wound religious community means people start talking. You overhear 2 women whispering as you pass. She's always alone. Something's not right. Maybe her humors are poisoned. It's meant to be subtle, but anxiety has radar for rejection. Every mutter feels like a war drum. By late afternoon, you reach what might have been your breaking point if you weren't so practiced at enduring. Your chest aches. Your thoughts won't slow down, and everything smells like smoke and wet dirt. You try to isolate yourself again, behind the hay cart this time, but soon enough, someone finds you. It's not a friend. You don't have those. It's the village midwife, older, severe, curious. She asks if you've been seeing shadows, hearing voices, feeling watched. You want to laugh, but you're too afraid. No, you say quickly, because those are the questions that lead to shackles. You haven't lost touch with reality, you just have a brain that sounds like a courtroom on fire. But try explaining that in a world where even hiccups can be seen as divine punishment. She nods slowly, offers you a smelly pouch of dried herbs, tells you to boil them and drink the tea. You thank her. Later, you'll choke it down even though it tastes like dirt and probably contains bark. It's something, and something is all you've got. Dinner is bland and silent. A lump of coarse bread and a spoonful of barley porridge. Someone's baby cries across the room. Someone else coughs. You chew and stare at the wooden table, counting your breaths and pretending to be fine. You can't remember the last time you laughed. You can't remember the last time you felt safe. In 2025, you might talk to a friend about your anxiety. Maybe you'd even joke about it. Send a meme. Use words like overthinking or catastrophizing. But here, there's no such thing as overthinking. There's only being wrong or being bad. Your thoughts aren't private, they're dangerous. A slip of the tongue could put you in the stocks. A strange look could put you on a list. And women in particular, a single sign of emotional instability could land you accused of sorcery. Again, not metaphorically. Literally, you lie down early that evening, wrapped in a wool blanket that smells like mildew. The cottage is cold, and the wind howls through the cracks in the wood. Someone snores. Someone shifts. You pretend to sleep, eyes wide open. Your thoughts churn. What if this is forever? What if something really is wrong with you? What if tomorrow is worse? No one in your life has ever said, "You're not broken." No one has taught you about serotonin, or fight or flight, or cognitive distortions. All you have is the knowledge that if you don't fit, you must be flawed. So you stay quiet. You stay invisible. You survive barely. You wish you could say something. Just one sentence. I think I'm having anxiety. But there are no words for that yet. No one understands. And in medieval times, that misunderstanding can be lethal. The next morning comes far too quickly. You barely slept. Again. Every little creak of the rafters sounded like footsteps. Every whispering breeze outside convinced you the priest was coming to knock on your door. In truth, no one's knocking yet, but the fear is as real as the fleas in your bedding. You wake up in a full-body haze, exhausted from doing absolutely nothing, and still somehow terrified of doing anything. There's no coffee, no medication, no phone to scroll through to numb the dread. Just another sunrise, another list of expectations you can't meet, and a town that's starting to suspect you're not quite right. So today, you try a different tactic. Overcompensating. You go to morning mass. You make sure everyone sees you crossing yourself. Kneeling on cue, reciting every line you know, even if your voice trembles like a leaf caught in a storm. The church is packed. The air smells of damp stone and sweat. Latin echoes off the high ceilings as the priest preaches about temptation, suffering, and divine punishment. You're desperately hoping this buys you some safety, some peace, some cover. But the irony is medieval religion offers little solace to someone with anxiety. In fact, it's often the opposite. The church doesn't think you're mentally unwell. It thinks you're spiritually compromised. Your anxious shaking might be read as trembling under the weight of sin, your inability to focus, perhaps demonic distraction, that tightness in your chest, a symptom of guilt that needs to be confessed. Now, loudly, publicly. And if the priest decides your trembling and tears are proof of the devil's hand, there's an entire process ready to save you, one that includes rituals, humiliation, and sometimes fire. You sit very still. You try to look holy, but not too holy. Overly zealous people are also suspicious. They might think you're trying to cover something up. So you fold your hands neatly, nod when others nod, smile when someone catches your eye. All while your mind is a tornado and your body feels like it's vibrating from the inside. The sermon ends. You're still in one piece. Barely. As you leave, an older woman grabs your arm tight. Her eyes narrow. You looked strange, she whispers. Maybe speak to Father Thomas. You nod, smile, thank her. You do everything except scream. I'm just nervous, not cursed, because you know that wouldn't help. Later that day, you find yourself sitting across from the very person you hoped to avoid. Father Thomas. He's old, stern, smells like wax and mold. He asks if you've been having bad thoughts. You want to say yes, but also no. But also, please stop asking questions before I cry. Instead, you say something vague like, I felt troubled. He nods slowly. This is not reassuring. He opens a thick book scripture or some terrifying manual of penance and begins to lecture you. Not about mental health, about the devil's tricks, about how fear and sadness are the enemy's favorite tools. He asks if you've been praying enough. You have. So much praying. So many nights whispering pleas into the dark, hoping the pit in your stomach would go away, but no amount of Hail Marys has helped. It turns out prayer isn't a great cure for a chemical imbalance. But good luck explaining that to someone who thinks leprosy is caused by lust. Father Thomas leans forward. He asks if you've spoken in tongues, seen visions, felt a shadow watching you. You shake your head, terrified. You know where this line of questioning goes? If he decides you're cursed, or worse, possessed, you could be exorcised. Not metaphorically, physically, tied to a chair, doused in holy water, screamed at until something breaks, even if it's just your will to live. You leave the church shaken, not healed, not even helped, just more certain than ever that something bad is coming. Your anxious brain doesn't need much encouragement to jump to conclusions, and now it's convinced you're a few days away from being tied to a post and called a heretic. There are no support groups, no therapy dogs, no calm, validating voices telling you you're not alone. All you have is fear and the creeping suspicion that the church is watching you. Because it is. Everyone is. Constant surveillance is part of village life. There's no privacy, no secrets, no time to unravel quietly. If you break down, it will be public. If you crack, they will make an example of you. So, again, you fake it. You laugh when people joke. You work twice as hard. You make eye contact. You say your prayers. You bake extra bread for the poor, hoping charity buys a bit of grace. You do everything short of carving "I'm fine" into your forehead. And still, you can feel the unease spreading. Your anxiety isn't just in your chest anymore, it's in the air. People notice when you pause too long before answering, when your hands twitch, when you flinch at sudden noise. And because there's no education, no medical understanding, no DSM-5 in the parish library, their minds leap to the only conclusion they've been taught. The devil has found a crack in you. As absurd as it sounds, this isn't paranoia, it's history. The church held vast power over the explanation of illness, both physical and mental. Women were more often suspected of possession. Men might be seen as weak or drunk. but women with emotional disturbances. Dangerous, tempting, witchy. By nightfall, you've made it through another day without being labeled. Congratulations. You've dodged the spiritual police, avoided the judgmental eyes of your neighbors, and suppressed every ounce of panic you felt for 16 hours straight. But now you lie in bed again, muscles sore from tension, throat raw from fake conversation, heart pounding like you ran all day even though you barely moved. Tomorrow, you'll do it again, and again, until something gives out. Because in medieval times, if you had anxiety, the church didn't see a person needing help. It saw a soul needing purification. And that could be deadly. You wake up on the third day, if you could even call what you've been doing sleeping. Your bones ache, your mind races, and your stomach has decided that food is a suggestion, not a need. Today, though, you decide to try something radical, not a potion, not prayer, not another trip to Father Thomas. Instead, you decide to speak. It starts small. You're helping gather firewood with the neighbor's daughter, Agnes. She's around your age, always humming some off-key tune and never afraid to talk. Today, you muster a sentence. Do you ever feel nervous? For no reason. She stops humming. Then she frowns. Like before a storm. You try to clarify. No. I mean, all the time. Like your chest is heavy and you think something bad is coming. But nothing's really wrong. You can't stop thinking and it feels like your head is full of bees. She looks at you like you've grown a second nose. That's odd, she says, her tone cool. Maybe you need more iron, or less cheese, or more prayers. You smile weakly and never bring it up again. Word spreads quickly in a small village. Agnes didn't mean harm, but she likely told her mother. Her mother told the baker told his wife. And now there's a soft, humming tension in the air around you. People look a little longer, talk a little quieter when you pass. You feel it in the way the blacksmith avoids your eyes, in the way the washerwoman quickly changes the subject when you walk by. Later that evening, someone knocks on your door. It's not Father Thomas this time. It's Gregory, a bearded man with a big cross and a bigger opinion of himself. He's one of the church's self-appointed moral watchmen, a man who once accused a boy of devilry for drawing a frog with wings. He says he's concerned. He's heard rumors that you've been saying strange things, asking strange questions. He says he just wants to talk, but his voice has that tone, the one that makes you feel like you're already guilty of something. You try to explain. You say it again. Sometimes I feel overwhelmed, like my heart won't slow down, like I can't breathe. He nods solemnly. When did the devil first speak to you? You blink. No one spoke to me. Not out loud, he says. They never do. At first, your hands start to shake. Gregory invites insists that you attend a special prayer gathering. A cleansing? You say yes. Of course, you say it before he even finishes the sentence. Because you've learned that the only correct answer in medieval times is agreement. You're not sure what the gathering will be, but you already know it won't help. That night, you lie in bed and wonder how you've made it worse by trying to explain. All you wanted was a bit of understanding. All you got was suspicion. In 2025, you could vent to a friend, post on Reddit, even find solidarity in strangers. But here, one wrong sentence can lead to fire, or drowning, or the stocks, or exile. You think back to a story you overheard as a child about a woman named Alina. From the next village over, she used to talk to herself, wander the woods, cry without warning. One day, she disappeared. They said she had been taken. No one asked where or why. No one needed to. Everyone knew. Now, you begin to wonder if you'll be next. The day of the cleansing arrives, and you drag your feet all the way to the chapel. Inside, several villagers are waiting. Gregory, of course. Father Thomas, grim and distant. A few others who always seem a little too excited about religious rituals. You're told to kneel. They pray loudly. They anoint your forehead with oil. They lay hands on you without asking and chant for your deliverance. It might look holy to them, but to you, it feels like drowning in sound and pressure and judgment. You feel tears rise and force them back. Crying would be proof. Shaking would be proof. Fainting would be proof. And if you're proven to be unstable, well, that depends on how merciful they feel today. After an hour, it ends. They declare you watched, not cured, not forgiven, just observed. Which, in medieval village terms, means you are officially on thin ice. You're not thrown into a dungeon or chained to a post. Not yet, but your life becomes a little smaller. The baker no longer sells you bread without a sideways glance. Children stop playing near your house. A woman from 3 cottages over crosses herself every time she sees you. The worst part, you still feel anxious? All the time. But now, it's laced with terror. You learn a hard lesson that day, something you carry like a stone in your gut. You must never explain again. So you stop talking. You fake smiles when needed. You nod. You hum. You blend in. On the outside, you look cured. On the inside, you're still a tangled knot of fear and exhaustion, made worse by the fact that your only lifeline communication has been cut. Back then, explaining your emotions wasn't seen as brave. It wasn't seen as honest or self-aware. It was seen as weakness, or heresy, or treason. The medical text didn't even separate body from soul, let alone chemical imbalances from spiritual failings. And the closest thing to therapy was confession, a practice that only worked if your problem was guilt, not a hyperactive amygdala. But the world around you doesn't understand. It doesn't want to understand. And that might be the most anxiety-inducing thing of all. Because here's the truth no one tells you in medieval times. Pretending to be fine doesn't heal you. It just hides you, until one day, you vanish, like Alina. And no one asks why. It's now been several days since your quiet emotional implosion became public knowledge. You've learned to nod politely, to keep your hands from trembling where people can see, and to avoid speaking unless spoken to. But the weight hasn't gone anywhere. It just presses deeper, slower, like damp earth on a shallow grave. Your mind still loops endlessly. Your chest still tightens at nothing. And today, your body decides to join the rebellion. Headache, nausea, muscles stiff as old leather. So when someone suggests you visit the local barber surgeon, you don't argue. Now, to a modern ear, the term barber surgeon might sound like the punchline to a Monty Python sketch. But here, in medieval Europe, it's a real job and perhaps the only kind of healthcare you're allowed. Your options are limited. There are physicians, sure, but they work mostly for the wealthy. Apothecaries are slightly better, but half of what they sell is dried frog and powdered unicorn horn. That leaves the barber surgeon, the working-class jack-of-all medicines who will cheerfully shave your beard and amputate your foot in the same breath. You enter his shop, which smells like burnt cloth and moldy herbs. The room is cluttered with metal tools that could double as torture devices. A stained apron hangs on the wall. There's a bowl of leeches. And no, they're not decorative. You swallow hard. The barber surgeon Edric is a jolly man with permanently blood-stained fingernails and a handshake like being grabbed by a roast chicken. He eyes you with interest. You're the one who's been feeling strange. You nod. Tight chest, shaking, restless thoughts. He hums and pokes your wrist with a thick thumb, like he's testing fruit for ripeness. Too much black bile, he declares. Ah, yes. The four humors again, those eternally popular medieval fluids that supposedly control your entire life. Blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile. And since you're clearly melancholy, the black bile must be winning. Edric proposes a solution, bloodletting. Before you can object, he's already prepping a small, rusty blade. Bloodletting is the go-to treatment for everything from headaches to heartbreak, anxiety, bleed, fever, bleed, warts. Probably bleed those too. You're not sure how draining your body of one of the few things keeping you upright will help. But arguing seems dangerous, so you sit on the stool, you clench your fists, and you try to breathe. The blade bites into your forearm. It stings. It's messy. You feel dizzy almost immediately. Edric smiles, which is somehow worse than if he'd looked worried. He mutters something about balance and spiritual health while you try not to pass out. After a few minutes, he wraps your arm in linen and hands you a syrupy tonic that tastes like honey mixed with moss. This will help your thoughts settle, he says. And if not, come back and I'll try leeches next time. You nod, weakly, and stumble out. You're paler now, lighter, in the worst possible way. Your head swims. Your limbs are rubber. But more than anything, you feel violated, like your fear was treated not with care, but with casual brutality. And yet, bizarrely, people congratulate you. Someone saw you leaving the shop and tells others you're getting help. The blacksmith's wife calls you brave. The butcher pats your shoulder and says it's good you're not fighting nature. No one questions whether the treatment made sense. No one considers that draining a person's life force might worsen the symptoms of an overactive nervous system. That concept won't exist for centuries. That evening, you sit by the hearth with a blanket around your shoulders and your head still spinning. Your mother seems pleased you saw the barber. You look calmer, she says. You want to explain that you're calmer only because your body is too weak to panic. But you don't. You nod again, always nodding. You sip more of the syrup, wondering what's in it. Some herbs, sure. Maybe valerian root, maybe nightshade, maybe just a bucket of medieval nonsense. The placebo effect does its best, but your brain is still your brain. The thoughts still circle like crows. The fear still whispers from the shadows. The next day, Edric checks in. He offers you a stronger concoction, a thick gray paste to rub on your chest, allegedly made from bear fat and marjoram. You apply it, if only because saying no feels impossible. Does it help? Not really. But it gives people the illusion that something is being done. And that's what matters in this era. Appearances, effort, submitting to authority. If you follow the rules, maybe they won't look too closely at your still glassy eyes and your habit of staring into space for minutes at a time. At night, you lie in bed with a bandaged arm, a damp compress on your forehead, and a prayer half muttered between clenched teeth. You wonder if anyone has ever gotten better this way, or if everyone is just walking around wounded, inside and out, pretending they're fine because that's the only option. Maybe that's the scariest part of all. You're starting to realize that in medieval Europe, healing isn't about healing, it's about compliance. It's about doing the things that make other people comfortable, about silencing your pain so no one else has to see it. And when the barber surgeon slices into your skin, it's not really about you getting better. It's about proving that your suffering is being handled, controlled, packaged in a way that won't upset the balance of the village. After all, the system isn't designed to cure you. It's designed to contain you. The next morning arrives like a hammer to the skull. Your limbs are heavy, your mind fogged, and the sore spot on your arm where Edric bled you itches beneath the bandage. The worst part, it's market day. You had hoped for a quieter morning, one where you might hide in the garden or walk to the river in silence. But instead, bells clang in the village square and voices call out across the muddy roads. Chickens screech, children shout, wagons rattle over cobblestones, and every sound feels like a sword slicing through your skull. You take a breath and step outside. The village is already buzzing. Market days are meant to be communal, joyful, full of trade and laughter. For someone with anxiety, it's a full-on nightmare masquerading as civic life. Too many voices, too many eyes, too many smells, spilled ale, roasting onions, and whatever that goat just stepped in. Your heart rate doubles as soon as you step onto the main road. Someone bumps into you. You mutter a quick apology even though it wasn't your fault. Someone else laughs loudly nearby, and your brain instantly decides it must be about you. Your chest tightens, and you begin to lose track of what you're supposed to be doing. Bread. You came for bread. Or was it eggs? You're not even sure anymore. You just want to vanish into the ground. You duck behind a booth selling root vegetables and pretend to inspect turnips. But there's no escape here. Not in a village where everyone knows everyone, and no one minds their own business. You can't wander off without someone asking where you're going. You can't be alone without raising suspicion. And you definitely can't skip market day, because not participating in the community is almost worse than vomiting in the town well. You make it to the baker's stall and stand in line. Your hands won't stop trembling, so you keep them clasped behind your back. You try to breathe through your nose, slow and steady, like you once saw a monk do. But even that's risky. Any visible ritual or odd movement could make people whisper. Finally, it's your turn. You try to speak, but your voice cracks. The baker frowns. Still sick? He asks, loud enough for everyone within 6 feet to hear. You manage a nod and take the bread. No one stops you. No one shouts possessed, but no one smiles. Either. The rest of the day unspools like a slow-motion panic attack. You drop a basket of apples. You forget what Father Thomas told you about the holy day next week. You can't focus on anything. It's like your mind is a radio with all the stations turned on at once, and the volume knob is broken. By the time you finally stumble back to your cottage, you're vibrating inside your own skin. You shut the door. You exhale. But it's not silent here. Either. A baby wails next door. A rooster screams directly beneath your window. Somewhere outside, two drunk men argue about taxes or goats or something equally stupid. You curl into a corner by the hearth and cover your ears with your hands. You just want a moment of breath, a sliver of peace. But peace, in this time, is not a luxury you're allowed. Even when you do manage to slip away perhaps to the woods or the old path behind the mill, you can't be there for long. Being alone invites questions. Being alone as a woman invites danger. Being alone and visibly unwell invites the worst assumptions of all. You once heard of a woman who went to the forest every morning to collect herbs. After a few weeks, they stopped believing her. One night, her cottage was burned. They said it was an accident, but everyone knew. In medieval Europe, your very existence is community property. Your body, your time, your behavior, even your silence. All of it belongs to the village. If you withdraw, you're hiding something. If you show pain, you're diseased. If you say too much, you're mad. If you say nothing, you're suspicious. There is no safe zone, no off switch. So you do what you always do. You endure. Evening comes, and the sky burns orange behind the thatched rooftops. Smoke from a dozen hearths curls into the sky. carrying the scent of stewed cabbage and charred meat. You should be eating, but your stomach has other plans. It flips at the thought of food. Instead, you chew on a piece of dried apple and tell yourself it's enough. You lie awake that night. Again, there's a creak outside your window. You freeze. A dog barks. Then silence. Your mind fills in the blanks. Someone's coming. Maybe Gregory. Maybe Father Thomas. Maybe someone you've never met. Holding rope or a torch or a holy book, you stare into the darkness and realize something terrifying. You're more afraid of being seen than you are of dying. In this world, privacy is power. And you have none. There are no doors with locks. No rooms with soundproof walls. No headphones. No white noise machines. No kind therapist asking how you feel on a scale of 1 to 10. Your entire life is noise. Noise outside. Noise inside. And no one wants to hear your real answer to how are you. Because in medieval times, the only acceptable answer is fine. Thank God. And even that better sound convincing. You press a pillow over your head, not to block out the sound, but to feel something you can control. One small choice in a world that has offered you none. You consider screaming, but what if someone hears? Worse, what if no one does? It's now the 7th night in a row that you've laid in the darkness, staring at the rafters while your thoughts gnaw through your sanity like mice in a granary. Sleep used to come eventually out of sheer exhaustion, if nothing else, but lately, even that mercy has slipped away. You toss, you turn, you rearrange the same straw-stuffed mattress until your back hurts. Your eyes are heavy, but your mind refuses to shut up. You count your breaths, you pray, you mumble fragments of psalms under your breath, hoping that the rhythm will lull you into unconsciousness. It doesn't. It just makes you more aware of the silence between the words, the kind of silence that screams, the kind of silence that amplifies every creak, every drip, every distant footstep. You lie in that bed and think about death, not because you want to die, but because you can't stop picturing it. A flash of you not waking up, a flicker of being buried in the churchyard. You're not suicidal. You're just tired. And in 14th century Europe, tired isn't something you're allowed to be. Not in body, and certainly not in spirit. Because back then, insomnia wasn't a condition. It was a character flaw. If you couldn't sleep, it was likely because your soul was unclean. Perhaps you had unconfessed sins. Maybe you had secret desires or shameful thoughts you hadn't repented for. Or worst of all, you were being whispered to by something dark and invisible. The devil loved restless minds, the priest said. He crept into them while the rest of the village slept. He found his way in through the cracks. The woman down the road had once mentioned her husband couldn't sleep for weeks before he began ranting about fire and shadows. One morning, he was gone. They said he'd walked into the woods. He was never found. She doesn't talk about it anymore. She doesn't talk much at all. You turn over again and stare at the soot-stained wall. And for the 100th time, you try to will your thoughts away. But they multiply like plague rats. What if the fire goes out and the house freezes? What if tomorrow someone accuses you of faking? What if you sneeze in public and someone thinks it's a curse? What if Agnes tells the others that she saw you cry? The bed creaks under your tension. You squeeze your eyes shut and force yourself to stay still. Stillness is your only defense. If you get up, someone might notice. If you move around too much, your mother might wake up and ask questions. She's already mentioned your restlessness. She said it with that careful tone concern that's one question away from condemnation. In modern times, you'd have options. You'd search insomnia remedies on your phone. Melatonin, magnesium, guided meditations narrated by soft-voiced YouTubers in sweaters. But here, your only options are herbal teas, whispered prayers, or a trip to the local holy well where people have drowned more than once seeking healing. The worst part, you know the community watches. They know who sleeps and who doesn't. Your neighbor, for instance, always claims to wake for the 3 a.m. prayers. You've heard her brag about hearing God's whisper in the stillness. If she hears you moving during those hours, you won't be seen as holy. You'll be seen as haunted. Eventually, the sun rises and you haven't slept more than a few scattered minutes. Your eyes are dry. Your stomach aches. Your mind is ringing like a bell tower. And yet, you still have to get up and chop wood. You still have to haul water from the well. You still have to smile and pretend that your hands aren't shaking because you're 2 nights from collapse. Insomnia isn't a disorder in this world, it's a sin of omission. A failure to trust in God, a failure to rest in faith, a sign that you don't believe enough, or pray enough, or confess enough. And if your sleeplessness makes you slower, duller, clumsier during the day, that too is your fault. Laziness, disobedience, pride. There's no such thing as chronic fatigue, just sloth. You try to explain it once. You tell your sister, in a whisper, that you haven't been sleeping. She laughs. Don't eat cheese so late. she says. And pray before bed. You tell her you do. Then pray harder. She shrugs. So you do. That night, you kneel for half an hour before your straw mattress. You whisper every prayer you know. You apologize for sins you haven't committed. You offer to scrub the chapel floors or fast for a week if God will just let your brain go quiet. It doesn't work. Eventually, you lie back down and stare into the same darkness that now feels familiar, almost comforting. It's the only constant in your life now. The only thing you can rely on is the ache in your chest, the tightness in your throat, and the cruel, cruel clock that only ticks louder when the village sleeps. Sometimes you think about asking for help again, but the memory of Father Thomas's expression, or the barber surgeon's knife, stops you. So instead, you fake sleep. You keep your eyes shut when people walk past your bed. You breathe slowly and evenly when your mother comes in. You even let out the occasional fake snore if someone's particularly nosy. Because in this world, pretending to sleep is safer than admitting you can't. In modern times, there are books and podcasts that will tell you insomnia is linked to trauma, overactive minds, imbalance in cortisol rhythms. But here, it's just another thing that makes you strange. And strange people, as you've learned, don't last long, so you endure it, night after night, until your body becomes a theater of exhaustion, until your days blur together and you start to lose the ability to tell if you're dreaming or just hallucinating from fatigue, until the chickens pecking in the yard sound like whispers and your own breath sounds like judgment. And no one notices, because in a village that sleeps hard and judges harder, the only thing worse than staying awake all night is being caught doing it. By now, you've learned how to walk through your days as if you're underwater. You smile at the right moments. You respond to greetings with the proper muttered blessings. You avoid eye contact that lasts too long, but not so little that it seems evasive. You hold yourself like you're calm, even though your nerves feel like frayed rope in a rainstorm. But today is different. Today, you panic. It starts with something small, as it always does. A sound, a glance, a sudden change in light. You're at the marketplace again, this time carrying a basket of eggs. You've already survived the baker's stall and the weaver's gossip. You think you're going to make it home, but then it happens. Someone drops a cart of iron tools. The crash is loud, sharp, violent. The sound slams into your skull like a hammer. Your body reacts before your brain can intervene. Your heart leaps into your throat. Your hands go numb. And the eggs in your basket shatter as you clutch your chest. You try to take a breath, but the air won't come. Your ears ring. The world tips sideways. You feel like you're falling, but your feet are planted firmly on the muddy ground. You're not dying, but it feels like it. And that's the problem. Because in medieval Europe, there's no concept of a panic attack, no vocabulary for a nervous system going haywire, no understanding of the fight or flight mechanism. To the people around you, you don't look sick. You look possessed, or cursed, or weak, and all three are dangerous. Someone screams. Not you, one of the onlookers. Another person grabs your arm and pulls you upright. Hard. They're shouting something you can't hear over the sound of your own heartbeat. The world is spinning. Someone crosses themselves. Someone else mutters something about witchcraft under their breath. You try to speak anything to make them stop staring, but your voice comes out a jagged wheeze. Then Father Thomas appears. Of course he does, like a shadow summoned by fear. He pushes through the crowd and places a firm hand on your shoulder. His touch is heavy, suffocating. His voice is calm but cold. "What's happening here?" he asks, even though it's very clear that you're the happening. You shake your head. I don't know. I got dizzy." He narrows his eyes. "You fell, and you cried out." "I was startled," you whisper. "By what?" he asks. "A noise." You nod. "The cart." He cuts you off. "You must come with me. There may be spiritual interference at work." You try to resist. You say you're fine, but no one believes that anymore. So you're led away, your feet dragging through the dirt, your head down, eyes stinging. The villagers whisper. They always whisper. You end up seated in a side room of the church, stone walls pressing close. A single candle flickers near the altar. Father Thomas watches you like a hawk circling a rabbit. "Tell me," he says, "have you had impure dreams? Visions? Any signs from the devil?" You want to laugh, but there's nothing funny about this. "No." You say, "Just fear. I get afraid sometimes. Too fast. For no reason." He sighs. "There's always a reason." You try again. You tell him it's like a fire in your chest, a weight on your lungs. You describe the noise in your mind, the way it builds and crashes like thunder. You hope, foolishly, that the honesty will help, but all it does is confirm his suspicion. He sends for the village healer. Not Edric this time. This one is worse. An older woman with wild eyes and yellowed teeth, who insists on examining your tongue and sniffing your hair. She waves a bundle of herbs under your nose and mutters things you don't understand. She ties a piece of twine around your wrist to trap the evil and gives you a foul-smelling sack of dried fungus to sleep beside. You nod. You take it. You pretend it helps. It doesn't. By the time you're allowed to leave, the sky is dark and your body feels like it's been wrung dry. The panic has faded, replaced by shame. You were seen. You were exposed. And now there's no going back to invisibility. At home, your mother says nothing. She just looks at you like she's waiting for you to break the silence. You don't. What would you say? I had a panic attack in public has no translation in this world. You lie in bed that night, replaying the moment over and over again. The noise, the dizziness, the stares, the priest's hand on your shoulder, the healer's twine. It loops in your mind until you want to scream. But you don't scream. You can't. Not here. Not now. You're already a thread away from becoming a cautionary tale. And this is how anxiety becomes something else. Something bigger, something worse. Not just fear of what might happen, but fear of what already did. Not just dread of the future, but shame of the past. You become afraid of fear itself. And there's nowhere to put that fear. No outlet. No release. Just you and your thoughts. And a world that would rather believe you're cursed than admit that people sometimes suffer for no visible reason. The next day, no one says anything, but they look, and those looks say everything. The days blur together now, like ink spilled across parchment. You move through them with mechanical precision, chopping wood, fetching water, offering polite nods to people who now regard you like a cracked jug. Still useful, but only if handled carefully. You speak less, smile when prompted, and do your very best to seem better, whatever that even means. But inside, you're falling apart. The problem isn't just the fear. It's the isolation, not just from people, but from the very idea that your experience is real. Because in medieval Europe, there's no framework, no vocabulary for what you're going through. There are no words like anxiety disorder or panic attack. There is no phrase that means I can't stop overthinking. There's only a series of ancient explanations, each one more horrifying than the last. It's your humors. It's your sins. It's your soul. Take your pick. You sit in silence one evening while your family eats. The food is bland stew and stale bread, but you chew slowly, nodding as your mother talks about the crops, the weather, the neighbor's new goat. You want to join in? You want to say something normal? But your mind is somewhere else entirely looping, spiraling, chewing its own thoughts like cud. You consider speaking up, telling them how you really feel. But what would you say? That your heart won't stop racing even though you're sitting still. That you dread every sunrise because it means more pretending. That sometimes you wonder if your mind is broken beyond repair. No one would understand. Because here, mental health isn't health. It's morality. It's faith. It's spiritual hygiene. If your thoughts are dark, it's because you've invited darkness in. If your energy is low, it's because you've displeased God. If you can't sleep, you must have something to confess. There's no concept of trauma, no understanding that past events can bruise the present. If you're upset about something that happened years ago, they'd say, it's over. Forget it. There's no concept of the nervous system as something that can malfunction. No sense that your brain chemistry might be slightly off kilter through no fault of your own. There's only judgment. And occasionally, pity. The worst kind of pity. Like when the old widow next door stops by with a loaf of bread and a knowing look. You remind me of my cousin, she says softly. He used to stare at the fire like that. They sent him to the abbey. You nod, unsure what that means. She leaves without explaining. You wonder if he ever came back. Somewhere across the village, a rooster screams and a child laughs. Life continues. The cows still need milking. The thatch still needs mending. The priest still preaches on Sundays about resisting temptation and embracing obedience. But you feel detached from all of it. As if the world has become a play, and you're backstage watching, unable to speak your lines. You try the healer's herbs again. They make you drowsy but not peaceful. You try to pray more fervently. It only makes you feel more guilty. You clean more, thinking that perhaps productivity will fix you. It doesn't. One morning, you find yourself standing at the edge of the village pond, staring at the water's surface. Not because you want to jump in, but because it's still, perfectly still. Something your mind hasn't been in weeks. You envy it. Then you hear someone behind you. It's a boy barely 10 staring. You're the weird one, he says. Matter of fact, you don't respond. He runs away laughing. And that's when it hits you. Children know. Even they've absorbed the message. That sadness is wrong. That silence is suspicious. That nervousness is shameful. No one told them explicitly, but the message is in the air they breathe. So you pull your shawl tighter around your shoulders and walk back to the village. feeling like your skin has been turned inside out. The truth is, there are people like you in every village. Always have been. People who carry storms inside their heads, but without language, without recognition. They vanish into the woods, into the church, into themselves. You recall a phrase the priest once used, afflicted by the black wind. You wonder now if that was just anxiety all along. Maybe your grandmother had it too. She used to shake when she thought no one was watching. Maybe that uncle who went mad wasn't mad at all, just overwhelmed. Terrified, unheard. It's a quiet lineage, a bloodline of invisible pain. And still, no one names it. That night, lying awake again, you start creating names of your own. Not out loud, but in your head. You imagine a world where what you feel is not condemned, but understood. Where fear is not weakness, but signal. Where words exist to capture the chaos, words like spiraling, triggers, reassurance seeking. You imagine a future where someone could say, "You're not alone," and mean it. But that world is centuries away. Right now, all you can do is survive. By staying quiet, by pretending, by adapting your suffering into a shape that won't scare people. And if you're lucky, maybe no one will try to heal you again. Maybe they'll leave you alone long enough to find your own rhythm. Maybe you'll become one of those strange old women people whisper about, but fear just enough to leave in peace. Maybe that's the closest thing to mental health care you'll ever get. You've reached the point where desperation outweighs skepticism. After weeks of whispered prayers, botched explanations, and one too many near exorcisms, you find yourself clutching a bundle of herbs wrapped in scratchy cloth, hoping that somewhere in this mess of dried leaves lies a solution, or at least a brief reprieve. You didn't go to the church this time. You avoided Edric and his blood-happy blade. Instead, you visited a woman who lives on the outskirts of the village. People call her a healer, sometimes with admiration, sometimes with suspicion. Her cottage smells like damp wood and crushed mint, and there are bones tied to the rafters, which you try not to stare at. She has eyes like storm clouds and fingers that tremble not from fear, but age. I get scared. You told her, unable to explain more. She didn't ask questions. She just nodded and disappeared into a back room full of jars and smoke. When she returned, she handed you the bundle. "For your wind," she said. "You're not sure what that means, but you paid her with half a wheel of cheese and a promise not to tell Father Thomas. So here you are, steeping the leaves in hot water and praying they do something, anything besides kill you. The tea tastes like dirt and bitterness. The first sip makes you gag, but you force it down anyway. There's no instruction sheet, no dosage guide, no hotline to call if you experience unusual side effects. Just a warm cup and blind faith. That night, you feel different, not better, not cured, but the constant churning in your chest slows, just slightly. You sleep for 4 consecutive hours. A new record. You wake up with a dry mouth and a fuzzy tongue, but also with something dangerously close to hope. So you go back. She gives you more different herbs this time. Valerian root, maybe, or mugwort. You can't tell. Medieval herbalism is as much guesswork as science. Most recipes are passed down orally, changed with every generation, and occasionally mixed up when someone misreads wormwood as woodworm, which, for the record, is not a seasoning. Still, you persist. You brew, you drink, you whisper thanks to whatever small gods might be listening. And for a while, it helps until it doesn't. Because one night, you add just a bit too much of something, or maybe not enough of another, or maybe the herbs themselves were harvested too early, or too late, or during the wrong moon phase. Whatever the reason, your stomach revolts within minutes. You vomit into the straw beside your bed. Your limbs go cold. Your head swims like the pond during flood season. You recover. Barely. Your mother suspects you ate something spoiled. She's half right, but you don't tell her about the herbs. You don't want them taken away, even with the risk. They've been the only thing standing between you and complete collapse. The problem is, you're not the only one with this idea. Soon, other villagers begin whispering about the healer's potions. Some say she cures the plague. Others say she caused it. A child with a fever is given a tincture and dies the next day. No one blames the fever. They blame the brew. You watch the healer's cottage from afar now, too scared to return but too anxious to stop needing her. One morning, you find it burned to the ground, ashes where hope once lived. No one speaks of it. No one has to. You bury the last of your herbs in the garden, crying quietly as if laying a friend to rest. With the healer gone, your world shrinks again. The herbal relief, even if partial, is gone. The church won't help. The barber wants more blood. And the community, they just want you to smile like nothing's wrong. So you try something else, something you swore you never would. You start gathering your own herbs. It's dangerous. Not because of the plants, though, those can be lethal too, but because of how it looks. A woman alone in the forest, picking leaves and roots. It's not far from witch in the minds of your neighbors. But you do it anyway. You read old scraps of notes passed between midwives. You ask quiet questions. You test things carefully, one sip at a time. Always alone. Always ready to throw it up if something feels wrong. You become your own apothecary, your own risk analyst, your own desperate doctor. Some things help. Chamomile calms your stomach. Lavender clears your head. Peppermint tea makes you feel like maybe, just maybe, you're going to be okay. Other things don't help at all. One night, you try a mix said to chase the madness. It makes your vision blur and your heart pound like a drum. You spend the night gripping your straw mattress, sure that you're dying. The next morning, your ears are still ringing, but you keep going. Because what else can you do? There are no studies, no peer-reviewed journals, no safety standards or expiration dates, just instinct, desperation, and the hope that maybe your body will stop fighting itself if you give it the right ingredients. And yet, there's something empowering in the ritual. Even when it fails, it's your choice. Your body, your experiment, your tiny rebellion against a world that insists you're broken because you feel too much. You begin to understand why people cling to their remedies even when they don't work. Because doing something is always better than doing nothing, even when that something could kill you, especially when doing nothing already feels like dying. So you keep your little bottles hidden in a hollow log behind your cottage. You grind leaves at night, whispering to yourself. You test, you record, you survive. And for the first time in weeks, you feel, if not better, then not worse. That's something. It's enough. For now. Eventually, someone suggests what they believe is a final, holy solution. The monastery. You're not sure whether it's meant as help or exile, but the tone in your mother's voice when she says, maybe a few days with the brothers will do you good, doesn't invite questions. You nod, because that's what you do now. You pack nothing. There's nothing to pack. Just a cloak, a satchel of dried bread, and the knowledge that this will either save you or seal your fate. The monastery sits at the edge of the woods, surrounded by stone walls and silence so heavy it feels like a second sky pressing down. As you approach, you hear no birds, no village clamor, not even the wind, just the sound of your own heartbeat, loud, fast, untrustworthy. A thin monk opens the gate. His expression is unreadable, halfway between welcome and suspicion. He leads you through narrow halls into a chamber with a single bed and a crucifix on the wall. There's a candle, a jug of water, nothing else. You'll have peace here, he says. Peace. You try to believe him. Your first day is spent in near total silence. The monks don't speak unless they must. Their entire lives are built on ritual prayer at set hours, work in the gardens, quiet meals in long halls where no one looks each other in the eye. The stillness should be calming, but instead, it's terrifying. There's nowhere to hide inside yourself here. No distractions, no noisy marketplace, no tasks loud enough to drown out your thoughts. Just stone, and silence, and your own screaming mind. At night, you lie awake on the hard mattress, staring at the ceiling, waiting for a bell to ring that will at least give you something to do. Your heart races, your palms sweat, and when you finally doze off, it's into a dream where you're being chased by monks in robes that stretch forever, whispering psalms in voices that sound like knives. In the morning, you try to keep up. You join the others in the garden, pulling weeds in neat, holy rows. You work in silence. You avoid eye contact. But the stillness isn't just external, it's expected within. You're supposed to feel peace here. You don't, and that becomes a problem. One monk, older than the others, watches you closely. He notices your shaking hands, your twitching eyes, the way your foot taps beneath your robes. He approaches one afternoon. While you're scrubbing pots, you carry unrest, he says. You don't know how to answer that, so you nod. He takes you to the chapel, makes you kneel, begins chanting in Latin. At first, it's gentle, monotonous, repetitive, almost soothing, but it doesn't stop. He keeps going, louder, faster. You feel the pressure building inside your chest again, the heat rising in your throat. You want to run. He places a hand on your back and whispers, "Let it out." You think he means prayer, but your body interprets it differently. You begin sobbing loud, messy, unstoppable. Years of fear and shame pour out of you in a single flood. You collapse forward. He doesn't touch you again. He just keeps chanting. Later, they tell you that was a kind of release, a spiritual detox, a blessed purging. You're not sure what it was, but afterward, you're exhausted in a way that goes beyond physical, like something cracked inside of you and not in the freeing sense. In the "you'll never be quite the same again" sense. You stay 3 more days. They feed you simple meals. They make you walk in the garden. They give you books, though you can't focus enough to read. Occasionally, one monk nods to you in the hallway. That's the extent of companionship. There's no therapy, no questions, just space. And yet, something changes. Not because they healed you, but because for the first time, no one asked you to pretend. They didn't expect smiles, or conversation, or productivity. They expected nothing. And that, strangely, feels like mercy. When you leave, no one hugs you. No one blesses you. A monk simply says, "May your soul be lighter." It isn't, not really, but it's a bit quieter. You return to the village and people look at you like you've gone to the edge of the world and come back slightly stranger. They keep their distance. They think the monastery either fixed you or tamed you. Either way, they're satisfied. But inside, you know better. You weren't cured. You were paused. The monastery gave you space, but not tools. Silence, but not language. It was like trying to reset a broken limb by resting it on a stone floor and hoping the pain would stop. Still, you don't regret going. In a world where most people would rather bleed you or burn you, a place that simply left you alone feels almost revolutionary. Back in your cottage, you pick up your old routines again. Bread, water, chores. But now you do them a little slower. You let yourself pause. You let yourself breathe. Sometimes you even close your eyes in the garden and pretend the silence is yours. It doesn't last, but it helps. And in a time like this, that's enough. Returning from the monastery, you expected cautious glances, perhaps some awkward silence, maybe even a few polite lies like, "You look better." But what you didn't expect was the absence. It starts small. The blacksmith, who once gave you a nod every morning, now busies himself with his forge whenever you pass. The children you once shared bread with stop skipping near your path. Agnes, remember Agnes, turns her head so fast to avoid your gaze you wonder if her neck snapped. You walk through the market like a ghost. Not invisible, worse. Seen, known, and still ignored. You used to worry that people would talk about you. Now, you realize it's far worse when they don't. At first, you tell yourself it's your imagination. You try to smile more. To initiate conversation, you wave at a woman drawing water. She stares at you, then turns back to her bucket. You greet the weaver. She mutters something about needing to check her yarn. You offer to help the midwife carry firewood. She says she's fine. No one is unkind. Exactly. No one throws stones or shouts curses. But every gesture, every look, every awkward silence becomes a thread in a new garment, and it's suffocating. You've gone from suspicious to pitied to something worse. Feared. You hear whispers again. But they're different now. Not dramatic. Not urgent. Just quiet avoidance. "She's not right," someone says behind your back. Touched by something. Another adds, "You pretend you didn't hear, but you did." And worse. You agree? Because deep down, the most dangerous part of living with anxiety in the Middle Ages isn't the panic, or the silence, or the lack of understanding. It's what it does to your own belief in yourself. You start to internalize it. You start to see your own fear through their eyes. You begin to believe that you are, in fact, broken. You try to act normal. You cook more. You volunteer to clean the chapel. You help a child retrieve a stuck cat from a tree. But even then, people look at you like you're performing, like you're a dog that might bite if startled. And soon, the invitations stop. No more shared meals. No more song nights. No more gatherings for harvest prayers. You become the cautionary tale. The one parents warn their children about. Don't be like her. They'll say, "She stayed in her head too long. She stopped going to confession. She walked alone too often." You try not to care, but you do. Loneliness, it turns out, is its own sickness, one that eats at your ribs and makes the world lose color. You begin to talk to yourself more. Not out of madness, but necessity. You hum songs you haven't heard in years. You take longer walks into the woods, pretending you're invisible, pretending you're free. There's one girl, though, a child. No more than 7. She appears near your cottage every few days. At first, she watches from a distance. Then, one day, she offers you a flower. You're afraid to take it. You worry it's a trick. But she smiles with the kind of innocence only children can afford. So you accept. The next day, she brings 2 flowers. You ask her name? "Marin," she says. "Why aren't you afraid of me?" You ask, your voice fragile. She shrugs. You look like someone who thinks a lot. Like me, you nearly cry. For weeks, she visits, not every day, not always with words. Sometimes she just sits beside you, drawing in the dirt or listening to the birds. But in her presence, you begin to feel, dare you think it, human again, until her mother finds out. One afternoon, You hear shouting? Not at you, at Moran. You're not to go near her, her mother screams. She'll curse your thoughts. She'll give you the sickness. The sickness, that's what they call it now. Not possession, not madness. Just the sickness. Marin doesn't return. You don't blame her. You wouldn't return to you either. So you retreat, further and further, into your cottage, into yourself. You cook only for necessity. You walk at dawn or dusk, when the village sleeps. You light your own candles at night and try to make the walls feel like comfort instead of a cage. But one day, you wake up and realize something. You've outlasted their curiosity. No one asks if you're healed anymore. No one tries to fix you. No one sends the priest or the barber or the healer or the monk, because they've decided you're incurable. And in this world, that means irrelevant. They've filed you away like an old scroll with smudged ink. Still around, still legible if someone squints hard enough, but no one wants to bother reading. And oddly, that gives you freedom. Because if no one expects you to return to normal, then you're no longer required to pretend. You can wake up late. You can cry without hiding. You can sit by the pond and let the breeze unravel your thoughts without fearing who's watching. It's not healing, but it's something, and that something feels like yours. So you start writing things down not on paper. You can't afford that, but in patterns on the wall, in songs you hum, in little rituals that only you understand. You name your fears like old friends. You map your moods by the phases of the moon. You build a language for your pain, even if no one else can read it. And for the first time in your life, you begin to wonder, maybe surviving this long is itself a kind of rebellion, a small, stubborn act of resistance. The word doesn't exist in the way you know it today, not exactly. But the concept does. People begin to refer to you in careful tones, usually just out of earshot, with words like disturbed, moonstruck, or not quite all there. The term they favor most is lunatic, a relic from the Latin lunaticus, meaning someone affected by the moon. You never thought the moon had a personal vendetta, but apparently it's been held responsible for centuries of sleeplessness, sadness, and fear. According to local lore, the moon tugs not just at the sea, but at the softest parts of the human mind. And since your moods seem to swell and crash like the tide, the villagers are convinced you're lunar touched. And once you've been labeled, once that mark is pinned to your back, everything you do is reinterpreted through that lens. If you laugh too hard, you're having a fit. If you speak too quickly, you're rambling. If you cry, it's proof. If you sit quietly, they whisper that you're listening to voices only you can hear. A strange thing happens when you're labeled a lunatic in the Middle Ages. You stop being a person and start becoming a symbol. You're no longer that girl who helped the midwife or the one who shared her bread during the storm. You're the lunatic. The village's living lesson in why people should stay obedient, faithful, and above all, silent. One morning, you trip on a loose stone while carrying a bucket of water. You fall hard, skin your knees, spill everything. A child sees and screams, not because you're hurt, but because, in their mind, lunatics are unpredictable, dangerous. They've heard stories. They know what happens when madness gets loose. A crowd gathers, as it always does when something breaks the monotony. Someone offers a hand. You hesitate but accept it. The touch feels awkward, more like a handler steadying an animal than one person helping another. You thank them. They nod. They step away quickly. You hear someone mutter, "She's getting worse." That night, you sit outside your cottage and try to understand what worse means. You haven't hurt anyone. You haven't shouted or cursed or danced naked in the town square, which, according to stories, is how a lunatic behaves. You just feel too much. You think too much. You suffer in ways that don't leave bruises. But here, emotional pain only counts if it's loud, if it disrupts, if it terrifies. And if it doesn't, it's ignored until it slips into something people can fear. The fact that you haven't collapsed or disappeared only deepens their unease. You're a contradiction they can't resolve. Soon, you notice changes. The constable begins patrolling past your house more often. You receive less food from shared stores. Someone scribbles a mark on your door in charcoal, an old symbol. Maybe a warning, maybe a prayer. No one owns up to it. And then, one morning, the priest visits. Not Father Thomas this time. A younger man, sent from a neighboring village. He's calm, well-groomed, and unsettlingly polite. He says he's come to assess. You don't know what that means. He asks you to sit. You do. He asks how many hours you sleep. You lie and say enough. He asks if you've heard voices. You say no. He asks if you've seen visions, had any fits, or spoken to creatures that don't exist. You shake your head. He nods, jots something down in a little book. You wonder if it's ever been used to help anyone. At the end, he sighs. You've been identified as potentially unsound, he says, almost kindly. You'll need supervision. You ask what that means. He doesn't answer directly. Instead, two village men start repairing the broken door to the old hut near the edge of town. It was once used to house a traveler with the pox. Long ago. Now, it's being prepared. You aren't taken there immediately, but everyone knows what it means. You're not locked away. Not yet. But the message is clear. One wrong move, one more broken egg or misheard phrase, and you'll be confined for your safety and theirs. You consider running, but to where? The next village. They'd hear your story before your footsteps even faded from this one. The forest. You'd freeze, or worse, you'd starve. There is no system of care, no safe house or sanctuary, just walls, some made of stone, others made of silence. So, instead, you wait. You keep your eyes low, your mouth shut. You make fewer mistakes. You speak slower, like you're translating your own thoughts before they leave your lips. You act like a person watching themselves in a mirror at all times. You become what they want. Harmless, manageable, fading. The cruelest part. It works. The label doesn't go away, but it hardens like a scar. People adjust to it. They stop being startled. They stop worrying you'll explode. Instead, they talk over you, around you, about you, never to you. That's the true cost of being labeled a lunatic. Not the fear, not the shame, but the vanishing. You are still here, breathing, thinking, trying, but they've decided who you are. And once that story is told, it's nearly impossible to rewrite. Still, you write your own version anyway, if only in your head. You tell yourself that you are not mad. You are not broken. You are not a warning. You are just a person in pain, living in a world that doesn't know how to deal with pain it can't see. And that truth, quiet as it is, becomes a kind of resistance, a small, flickering torch you carry inside yourself. Even if no one else sees it, even if they call it madness, you know it's light. They say routine is grounding. That structure gives you a sense of purpose, a rhythm that can steady even the most chaotic mind. Maybe that's true in a modern world with alarm clocks, grocery stores, and time for rest. But in medieval Europe, your routine doesn't feel like comfort. It feels like slow execution by exhaustion. Each day begins before the sun rises. You haul water from the well with trembling arms. You tend to animals that no longer flinch when you pass, but do still sense your erratic energy. You knead bread with fingers that sometimes go numb from tension. Then set it beside the hearth and hope it doesn't burn because your thoughts drift too often now, far too often. When your head is a storm and your hands are shaking, every tool becomes a hazard. The scythe slips from your grip during the harvest. The needle pricks your fingers again and again while sewing. You drop a hot coal from the fire onto your foot and don't even cry out. The pain is almost a relief, something solid, something visible. Your body bears the marks of quiet suffering, bruises from stumbles, blisters from clenching tools too tightly, a burn on your wrist from when you forgot the kettle was still boiling. But no one links these injuries to your mind. They think you're clumsy, or lazy, or distracted by impure thoughts. One woman suggests you might be touched again. The constable offers to check on you more often. You smile, nod, lie, because telling the truth doesn't help. No one wants to hear that you can't concentrate, because your mind is a runaway cart, careening from one imagined disaster to the next. That you're so caught in spirals of fear that sometimes you forget where you are, or what day it is, or how long you've been standing in the same spot staring at a pile of kindling. So you say, "I'm tired," and they nod. That's acceptable. You say, "I didn't sleep well." They offer a garlic clove to put under your pillow. You don't say, "My brain keeps warning me of things that aren't happening, and I can't turn it off. And I think it's getting worse," because that would lead to more questions, or worse, actions. So you push through. You collect eggs from the hen house, heart pounding because you're sure anything will go wrong. You cross the frozen stream on your way to gather herbs and imagine slipping, cracking your head open, being left there until spring thaw. You light the fire and triple check the coals because one day you forgot, and your mother woke up coughing. And now the memory of that look on her face haunts you worse than your dreams. Your tasks don't feel grounding. They feel like walking a tightrope over suspicion and self-doubt. Because here, mistakes aren't just errors. They're warnings, one too many bruises, and someone will call you careless, or cursed, or both, one too many cuts. And they'll whisper again about madness. You try to keep your space neat. You try to move with purpose. You try to do everything just right. Because perfection, however impossible, might be the only shield you have left. But perfection is a heavy weight. And some days, you drop it. One morning, you're splitting kindling with a dull axe. Your mind is halfway elsewhere, running through a conversation you had 2 days ago, worrying that you sounded strange. The axe slips, Not dramatically, just enough. It grazes your thumb, leaves a deep gash. Blood spills fast and hot. You hide it. Wrap it with cloth before anyone sees. If someone were to notice, they'd offer help. But help, in this village, comes with a price. Help means questions. Help means being watched again. You can't afford that. So you clean it yourself. Bite down on cloth when it burns. And tell no one. The wound festers. You tell yourself it's fine. It isn't. But this is what life has become. Managing invisible wounds while pretending you're not collecting visible ones. One evening, you're asked to help with the laundry. It's winter. The stream is freezing. You plunge your hands into the water, and the shock is nearly enough to make you faint. Your heart races. Your breath catches. And for a moment, you wonder what would happen if you just slipped beneath the surface. You don't. You keep scrubbing, but the thought stays with you. Not because you want to die, but because the idea of stopping, of not having to keep pretending, working, enduring is sometimes the most seductive thing you can imagine. And yet, you never stop, because the fear is stronger, not of dying, but of what happens if you don't try, of what they'll say, of what you'll become in their eyes. You already know what that label feels like, clinging to you like wet cloth. So you keep going, even when your body shakes so hard you can't carry firewood, even when your mind blanks and you forget what you were doing mid-task, even when someone asks, "Are you all right?" And you smile and say, "Of course," with such ease it scares even you. And still, the danger grows, not from the world, but from inside you, because anxiety, untreated and unspoken, becomes something else. It warps how you see everything. You second-guess every movement. You assume the worst of every glance. You turn a stubbed toe into a death sentence in your mind, and then spend the next 3 hours wondering if people will think you're faking. Your days are now survival drills, not from war, not from plague, but from yourself. And the scariest part? No one sees it. To them, you're just strange, or quiet, or tragic, but not sick. Not in the way that matters. So when you spill a basket of apples and fall to your knees to gather them with tears in your eyes, no one helps. They just step around you. Because a lunatic who bruises herself and cries over fruit is just part of the scenery now. You stay kneeling a little longer than necessary. Because maybe, just maybe, the stillness will offer a brief illusion of peace. It doesn't, but you get up anyway. You always do. By now, you've become an expert at hiding. Hiding the shaking in your hands by tucking them under your sleeves. Hiding the dark hollows beneath your eyes by avoiding direct light. Hiding the quickened breath and the sudden jolt of panic by turning away, pretending to cough. Forcing your lips into something that almost looks like a smile. You've become your own illusionist, disappearing right in front of them, performing daily miracles of invisibility. And it's working, or at least, it seems to be. The villagers don't whisper as loudly anymore. You no longer see the priest at your door or the constable making his subtle laps past your cottage. You've convinced them, or at least tired them out. And in this world, survival isn't about being understood. It's about being forgotten just enough that people stop trying to fix you. So you give them what they want. You laugh, just loud enough, at jokes you don't find funny. You nod along with stories even when your mind is 1,000 miles away. You attend church without flinching at the sermons about obedience and sin. You cross yourself in rhythm with everyone else, kneeling with perfect posture, mouthing the words you've long stopped believing. Inside, you're still unraveling, but outside, you are the very picture of quiet endurance, and that endurance is your only shield. The truth is, to survive anxiety in medieval times, you must become a master of performance. You cannot cry too often, or too loudly. You cannot speak of your thoughts. You cannot confess your fear unless it can be conveniently interpreted as spiritual doubt, something they can handle with prayer and fasting. Anything deeper is dangerous. Anything true is taboo. So you turn your real emotions into private rituals. You walk alone to the edge of the woods where no one can see you, and let yourself feel the full flood of panic that's been building behind your ribcage all day. You press your palm to the rough bark of a tree and whisper things you wish you could say aloud. I'm scared. I'm tired. I don't know how much longer I can keep doing this. The tree doesn't answer, but it doesn't judge either. At night, you sit by your tiny hearth and draw invisible patterns in the ash, telling yourself little stories. You imagine a village where people do understand, where anxiety is not a curse or a flaw, but just another part of being human. You imagine a future where there are words like trauma, neurodivergence, support. You imagine being heard without consequence, and for those few moments, you feel lighter. But the morning always returns. You wake up to the same gray sky, the same weight in your chest, the same expectation that you will get up, work, smile, obey. You remind yourself, don't slip, Don't stutter. Don't let it show. And so the mask returns. Even your body has learned to adapt. You tense your muscles in public so the trembling doesn't show. You clench your jaw to suppress the flood of words trying to escape. You walk slower so your dizziness doesn't betray you. Sometimes, you forget you're pretending. Sometimes, you forget you have anxiety, until it knocks you off your feet again. A burst of noise, a flash of shame, a wave of nausea from a thought you didn't see coming. And then it's back the fear, the spinning, the certainty that you're about to break in half. But now, you don't let anyone see. You've trained yourself too well. Even your panic is polite. This is survival. It's not healing. It's not thriving. It's not peace. It's enduring, one invisible blow at a time. Still, some days surprise you. A child smiles at you again. A kind word is offered without suspicion. The midwife, who once crossed herself when you passed, now asks if you've had enough to eat. Little things, not miracles, but glimpses of something resembling warmth. You learn to collect those moments like pebbles in your pocket. You don't speak of your pain, but you sing quietly while you work. You don't ask for help, but you help others when you can. You don't heal, but you build a life around the cracks carefully, gently, with the patience of someone who's had no choice but to learn how to endure. One evening, sitting outside beneath the stars, you finally admit something to yourself, not with bitterness, but clarity. They were never going to save you. Not the church, not the barber, not the herbs or the rituals or the silent monastery, not even the kind gestures that came too late. But you saved something. You saved the thread of yourself that refused to vanish completely. The quiet part of you that held on through every misdiagnosis, every judgment, every night without sleep. That small, flickering ember they all tried to smother with superstition, shame, and silence. It's still burning. And in a world that would rather see you as broken than admit it doesn't understand you, that ember is everything. It's your rebellion. It's your truth. And even if no one ever sees it, even if history forgets people like you ever existed, it's real. You are real. And somehow, you are still here. So here you are, still standing, still breathing, still surviving in a time that offered you no name for what you felt, no mercy for what you endured, and no tools to help you heal. You've learned to carry your storm in silence, to wear your fear like armor, to fold your pain into polite nods and empty smiles. And yet, through all of it, you've remained you, not the version they wanted, not the obedient, simple, grateful soul they could understand, but the true you, the one who feels too deeply, thinks too much, and breaks quietly rather than explode. You've adapted, not by becoming someone else, but by protecting the flicker of self the world tried to snuff out. In the grand, brutal sweep of medieval life of war, famine, plague, and religious terror, you were never going to be seen as a hero. There would be no songs about your resilience, no scrolls recording the way you fought invisible battles in silence. But that doesn't make them any less real. What you've done is nothing short of miraculous. You survived anxiety in a world that didn't even believe it existed. You didn't just live through the day, you endured the hours, the seconds, the tremors in your chest, the weight in your limbs, the dread that never let you rest. You learned to survive when there was no language for survival, when everything you needed was still centuries away. And maybe, just maybe, that means something. Because even now, in a world far removed from yours, someone else is lying awake, wondering if they're broken. Someone is hiding their fear, their pain, their strange, racing thoughts. Someone is surviving quietly, too. And they're not alone. Neither were you. Not really.